Hey everyone, today I have a very special video for you. I haven't done a video like this in a very, very long time. I'm coming up on almost 5 years after meeting Rob. November this year will be 5 years since I left the mental hospital. And I want to do a video titled, Looking Back Over My OCD Journey, all the way from the beginning. I want to talk a little bit about my childhood, how I was raised, talk about how I ended up in the mental hospital, not wanting to live anymore, how serious obsessive compulsive disorder is to the untrained eye, and why it's so difficult for family members and society to grasp, why it's easy when someone walks into a store with a prosthetic leg. Your mind can conceptualize how difficult that person's life may be to some degree. When it comes to OCD, no one will really understand it unless you have the chronic latching mechanism. And this is something that the private OCD battle, one of my favorite things that Rob has ever said, when you're recovering from OCD, it's like running the world's longest marathon or like climbing Mount Everest, but there's no one there to know this and no one there to congratulate you or give you a thumbs up along the way when you resist a hard compulsion. How OCD started to destroy many aspects of my life without proper tools and everything else in between. So before I go any further, I want to say thank you, first of all, before I give Phil's email and all the stuff that we have in the workings. Thank you for the years of support. I think I've made over 1,000 YouTube videos by now. I mean, I've made thousands and thousands of TikToks, Instagram posts, and hundreds of articles and WhatsApp articles. And I thank you to everyone who has followed my journey, and thank you for watching, all of us, not just me. I think this will be a very unique video, and it's good to go back to the beginning at times and think about where my life was, all the habits I changed, the beliefs I had to work on to where I was today. And if you need help with one-to-one coaching or webinar services, please email phil@ocdrecovery.com. Again, that is phil@ocdrecovery.com. You come to a webinar or a coaching call, gives you access to the WhatsApp groups, which there's a lot of private information specialized that go in there that you will not get in TikToks, Reels, Instagram, or a Facebook group. It's coming close to 20,000 members, the fastest growing OCD and anxiety platform, without a doubt, Facebook open group. And it's just a lot of fun. It's moderated, so the people that moderate in there have all been through the journey. It's very, very strict and tight on reassurance seeking, but we let people know in a compassionate way. So it's always important to go over that. So I grew up. I was born in Metuchen, New Jersey. Okay, my dad was 100% Italian. Okay, Anthony Senior Pinella, well, Anthony Junior Pinella, because we had Anthony Senior Pinella, which was my grandfather, who I had the privilege of being around until I was about the age of 12 to 13. I think in that age is when my dad's parents passed away. My grandfather was a massive cigar smoker. There's a great story that my mom looked out the window one time and I was 6, and she's like, "What the fuck?" And she sees me with this big 10-inch cigar in my mouth, and my grandfather's like, "Suck it, suck it." So my grandfather was a carpenter. He worked on all of the upper class, middle upper class, the higher up class attorneys in the Summit area, I believe, Summit, New Jersey, which is how my father got his first job at a firm, a bond firm, municipal bond firm called Mud Rose, I believe, which I think shut its doors down after 128 years in Manhattan. That was my dad's first job, and he was always telling me funny stories about that, how he showed up. And my dad was very honest. He went to a good law school, went to Stetson Law School, which is where my sister went. But he didn't have the schooling to get into Mud Rose. But because my grandfather, I believe, got him some pulls on that, he got a job at a very prestigious law firm at 26 years old. My dad, crazy stories, cow prying each other. They shut his fraternity house down because they were just nuts. It's different time periods, right? The stuff he told me about, I would think, God, if you did that stuff today, you'd be on CNN and MSNBC and Fox. You'd be arrested in 2 seconds, right? It's a different world. So, my father worked a lot as an attorney. He transferred over to a firm in Jersey, which he was a partner there for over 30 years, 3 decades. My dad was a character, larger-than-life personality, but he definitely had what I like to call subclinical OCD. I also think other family members on my father's side have subclinical OCD, and there's different levels of that as well. There could be very, very minor to, you're teetering, like you're bouncing on the red line to chronic OCD. You're one wrong genetic spike away from boom, and the light bulb moment, as we call it. But for whatever reason, certain things don't happen to certain people. I think, my genetics, which we're going to talk about why I think it played out to why Nick, got hit the hardest of anyone in my family. My father wasn't home a lot, never came to any baseball games. And if he did, it was later in my sporting career when I got older. But I was a troublesome kid. I got arrested a lot. I got in trouble a lot. I got a DUI when I was 23, a very bad one, which I don't have any memory of getting. I used a lot of illicit drugs. I thankfully never went down the hard route of meth. I'm sure in the pills I've taken a lot of Molly and ecstasy in my life. I'm sure there was dopier and upper pills back then. So I probably have taken traces of potentially dope, heroin. There was no fentanyl back in the scene. I think fentanyl was introduced in 2016, but someone can correct me on my drug history. But that's something I'm pretty informed on because of how bad the opioid epidemic hit my friendship. The girl I lost my virginity to, who I was very in love with, she unfortunately passed away of an overdose, and I can think of numerous friends just running in front of my mind right now who have passed away from overdoses. So I grew up in an environment that many people grow up in. I grew up in a very well-to-do area of New Jersey. There's many places like this around the world, not just America, where there's a lot of time and money. So a lot of kids can get themselves into trouble. And a lot of these parents, again, different generation, were raised through hard work, but then they wanted to give their kids the best life, which I like to call the failed experiment. I think anecdotally, we don't need any data to see that parents that were raised by that kind of, I can't remember what the name of the nickname was of the World War II. Maybe the best generation is what they were nicknamed. Raising the Gen Zers and then millennials, baby boomers and then millennials. And they were raised in a very tough environment. And then they said, I don't want my kids to have to go through that. So then they gave their kids everything, which I believe was one of the worst things you can do psychologically, mentally, and physically for a child. I think giving them everything. And I don't have kids, so I can only imagine how difficult this was, because my dad and my mother were not raised in easy environments, and they worked really hard for what they had. But I could see how, understandably, I don't want my children to have that, so they give their kids everything, which ends up becoming a problem long term. So my dad always had weird quirks about him, right? He obviously attorneys, doctors, lawyers, attorney is a lawyer, accountants, people in high, and then obviously entrepreneurs, but many other careers, engineers who make a lot of money. And if they have compulsive spending problems tied into mild or even chronic OCD, it's a slippery slope, to say the least. So my father had a big spending problem. Unbeknownst to me, I saw it growing up, but I didn't think anything about it. I was so wrapped up in my own head, wanting to be cool, wanting to have the best physique, wanting to be accepted by women, wanting to, just the fear of rejection I wasn't even aware of, like most people. People say the biggest, it is public speaking. They say public speaking fears are above death fears. Number one fear is public speaking. The number one fear is rejection. Social anxiety is just a title that we put. Other, primarily self. It's not so much other, it's the self. Because people say, I don't like the way this makes me feel. I could never accept myself if I do that. Yes, they're afraid of rejection from society and all the stuff that comes with it. The core of human beings, the myth, remember, self-esteem does not exist. The concept of it exists in fallacy. But what self-esteem is the idea of, if I act this way, I will be accepted. And even though you can give off the illusion in the train running smoothly, it can easily be derailed. This is why unconditional self-life, other acceptance, in my opinion, is the most important thing to teach our youth, our family, our friends, when they're open to learning, not just shoving it down their face. Because if I was the way I was, there's no way. And they have to want to come in with some vested skin in the game. So, growing up, like I said, I got into a lot of trouble. I was very fortunate because of the way my father was. My father had a house at the Jersey Shore, which then led me to working for Danny, who was a very big friend of mine back then. He was the owner of the Jersey Shore store. So if you ever watched the Jersey Shore, I was on a few of the episodes. The one in season 5 is the Inside Out prank, where Vinny and Paulie, everything was swapped in the house while the rest of the guys and ladies were out. So the guy that came with the AstroTurf and helped them lay everything down and change everything out, that was me in the video. They were great guys. I remember specifically that Danny came up to me and they asked me specifically to help them pull the prank because I treated them. I'm from Jersey. I was on anabolic steroids for 5 years. I was injecting melanin, which you can inject that pigmentation to change your skin. I looked like I was almost Puerto Rican. I did so. Then I was taking drugs, smoking cigarettes, doing a bunch of ecstasy, Molly, cocaine. It was just a very bad lifestyle. I remember when I went, when I came off anabolics, my mom worked for a medical doctor. He came in privately, and I remember, 12 years ago plus, he's like, your vitals are horrendous for 23 years old. Like, they're really bad. And I know you're on anabolic steroids because I'm looking at you right now, and you do not look natural. Just the skin tone. There's a lot of people that look very good natural. I'm just saying there are certain cues that people can have when they take high amounts of anabolic steroids. So that was something that, that was my life for a long time. But yeah, I was on the Jersey Shore. I worked there almost 7 summers. When the show was over for years, I actually was a tour guide because I knew the inside workings of the show so much that when Danny decided to rent that house out, which we rented out for daily and then weekly prices, and then he would tour during the day when no one had it rented, it was $10 a person cash from Cash Cow Machine. I knew the inside workings. It's one of the reasons I got so good at public speaking. It's one of the reasons I could speak to any age range, gay, straight, bisexual, transgender, different cultures, different languages, different belief systems. I treat everyone very much the same. I struggled with acceptance of other people, but off face value, I was very good at speaking to anyone, right? And I've always been like that. It's one of the things that many people say when they come on my coaching calls. They say, you're truly, you like to mess around and fuck around with jokes, but you are very accepting of people. Like, you talk to, I've coached 13-year-old girls. I've coached 75-year-old men. I mean, the whole range and understanding how you talk. I got that from doing tours at the Jersey Shore. I'm just day after day, tour after tour after tour after tour. I mean, sometimes I would have an 8-hour shift where I gave a 15-minute tour, literally the entire time straight, 15, 20 minutes. So that was a lot of fun. After I kind of, like that scene of my life was going behind me, at that time, I only had a couple friends who had passed away from hard drugs. It was really in that 2011 to 15 range where things got really bad. Even though the opioid epidemic was hitting quite hard with Oxycontins in 2008, 9, 10, 11. Again, thank everything there is out there that I did not go down that route, because I could have easily went down that route and messed my life up. And then I went to school in Florida. I went to University of Central Florida, UCF. Yep, go Knights. I was there my senior year, actually. 2016 was when they won believe it was the Orange Bowl. I never went to one game. I went to the tailgates, got hammered, but I never went to any of those. I had so many compulsions at those tailgates. Never took my shirt off. Never would eat before I went because I wanted to look lean. I mean, my OCD was running rampant, just not at the chronic level. And it's hard to see that. It's like, oh, I'm weird. I have these weird tweaks. We're going to talk about all that. School, never struggled in school. I was always very good. My mom even used to say that the teachers would say that growing up. They would say, Nicholas is, I love how they would say, Nicholas is not dumb. He just doesn't pay attention. I love that my mom said it like that and the teacher said it like that. I thought that was an incredible way and just a unique way to say it. And it's true. Thankfully, I've always enjoyed learning and reading. And I didn't always enjoy reading. I started reading pretty religiously 7 years ago. But I liked watching documentaries. I liked pushing the boundaries of the mind in many different ways. It's probably one of the reasons I tried a lot of, drugs at once. Dumb reason to do that. I'm just saying at the time, just the experience. So a lot of pros and cons, massive cons with that. And then I remember getting close to the end of school. My father's like, what do you want to do? So I took 2 law classes and I remember thinking, this sucks, which at the time, I mean, law is a great career. I think now I would be very good at it. I really do actually think I would fit very well, but I wouldn't do what my dad did. My dad was a municipal bonds attorney. He sat at a desk and did paperwork all day. I would want to be in the court, prosecutions. I wouldn't be in the heat cases. I just think I have a personality and belief system for that now. It's actually funny. Over the last couple of years, I would think it would be interesting to go back to law school now. And you combine law school with a chiropractic degree or law school with a medical degree, you are a killer and an expert witness when it comes to cervical disorders, lumbar problems, pathology, and then the belief systems I've had to apply in my practice with my wife and my patients in the chiro side, and then helping and teaching the massage therapists and the other chiros that work underneath us. So just teaching all about mindset. We had a team meeting about a week ago, and I talked all about, which is called the CRISP protocols, clinical reasoning and spine pain protocols. And I talked about the biopsychosocial and then what's called NSS, nociceptive system sensitization. These are the scientific terms for everything that we do with OCD. Everything. The exact same thing. CBT, RBT, exposures. And those terms, we use these fancy terms. It's just changing your beliefs and facing your fears. But as a society, we like the way it makes us feel. We know a bunch of 3-letter words. Like the WHO or the CDC or the FBI or the CIA. 3 letters sounds legit, doesn't it? Like if it was 2 letters. Reminds me, nothing off topic, but it reminds me of the late George, oh my God, what's his name? The comedian. Oh my gosh, it's my mind. George Carl. Anyway, you know who I'm talking about. The older guy with white hair. He was amazing. I can't believe. Anyway, he was like the 10 commandments. He goes, imagine if they said the 11 commandments. He goes, they came off the hill and been like, the 11 commandments? They would have been like, the fuck, get out of here. I'm not taking that seriously. But he's like, 10 sounds official, George Carlin. And then 3 is the same way. So that's why you use those. Imagine it was ERPZ. We do have EMDR, EDM. I always say that one wrong backwards. Yeah, anyway. So I decided I shadowed a chiropractor, physical therapist. I like the chiro side because chiros are a little bit more entrepreneurial spirits. We're physical therapists. No one's better than the other, but they tend to work for outpatients or inpatients. But it's more so today where I see a lot of physical therapists going out on their own. But chiropractors tend to be a little bit more in tune with business. We have a lot of business classes. There's a lot of chiros that are out there that run teams of medical doctors and surgeons. The chiro runs that, not the medical doctor. If I was to say chiros tend to be better business owners because we have to, we're just thrusted into that small business, medium and large size business a little bit more than the physical therapist has to do, the massage therapist, or even the medical doctor and orthos and all those other sides. So, of course, that's just my opinion, but I would say that's pretty well standardized in the medical field. And I went there and I had a blast. Now, this is where a lot of my beliefs became very, very problematic. I mean, when I was in chiro school, I was hot shit, whew, disagreements, arguments. I had a problem. So Albert Ellis says the optimal happiness, I like to use contentment, is skepticism, realism, and optimism. Well, optimism, besides my personality, was thrown out the door. I just was skeptical and realistic about everything. I mean, a lot of things that people say in any school. I mean, I have medical doctor friends where they would tell them nutrition stuff in school. They'd be like, that's not true at all. That's not true at all. I mean, like, to one example, it will always be calories in, calories out. Nothing can debate that at all. And you can try and debate that, but there are certain genetics that are affected more for that. You could be more of a slower metabolism, but a metabolism is metabolic, which means you can install it in certain ways. I'm not going to go down that route, but like people would say stuff to me in school and I would just be like, that doesn't make any sense, right? Which was arrogant in the way I did it. I've changed all that about my presentation now and how I conversate. I always joking and say I just read a book from MIT on critical thinking, which was hard to read, the MIT Press series. But I learned a lot about why I was so bad at debating and why most people, 99.9% of people, are very, very bad debating. Instead of saying, hey, look, that's a very good premise. Here's what I think. This is what I think. This is what I think. Here's a conclusion. Most people go, that's stupid. You're a moron. Of course you would think that. Those detractors provide this much value to a conversation. But it takes time to understand that and practice it. You can't just read about critical thinking or ABT. You have to actually apply it day in, day out in conversations, not avoiding tough conversations and stuff like that. So I got into a couple of big arguments in school, and then I had my second seizure of my life in school in 2018. I was in a bad spot. My father died. My father meant a lot to me. We never said I love you to one another. That was a tough thing about me and my dad. But he died of stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and it was a tough time for me. So, between the time my father dying, I lost my aunt, my mom's only sibling, her sister. She died at 56 from cirrhosis of the liver. Then we lost Lily, my dog. So my dad, my aunt, and my dog all died within, I think, like a 6-month period. My mom and my aunt, my mom's sister, my dad and my aunt both died within 3 months. So my mom lost her husband. They were separated, still very good friends. And I lost her only sibling, all within 90 days. I saw both of them days before. My dad 8 hours before he died, and then my aunt very close when she died. And it was, both my aunt was cirrhosis beyond belief. It was impressive what the human body will be willing to do trying to maintain homeostasis before it finally goes. So it was a tough time for sure. And then after my mom, we all went through all this. So I went home. I went to my dad's funeral. It was a great funeral. His gravestone is incredible. One of my dad's compulsions was disappearing and going and spending. So on his gravestone, it says Anthony Jr. Pinella, and then it says, be back in an hour. Literally, that's what it says on the gravestone. That's it. Be back in an hour. I don't even think it says you'll be missed. And that was just, we were having such a good time at the grave. And the funeral was so funny because my dad, again, being full Italian and in New Jersey culture, then my neighbors, so if you're looking at my dad's house, one this way, they were from Italy. They lived 6 months a year in Italy. They owned a bunch of stuff. Then the guy to the other side, Carmine, they owned Top Tomato, which was a large Italian delivery company in Staten Island. And these were amazing, great people. And a lot of these people showed up at my wedding, at my dad's funeral. And I remember my one neighbor, she was in the black veil and everything. I'm so sorry for your father. And I'm just like, what? Me and my sister were like, who the fuck are these people. But it was funny. I had all these like Italian attorneys and different people. They'd be like, hey, Nikki, I knew your father from a young age. I'm like, yeah, cool. I have no idea who you are, but thanks for coming. Well, my favorite story, which I've told a couple of times, is in the corner. So any of you guys know Don Mazzetti, very, very good friend of mine. We grew up together. I'm in a bunch of his videos as well. If you go and type in Don Mazzetti versus EDC or counting macros, the first couple minutes, you'll see my photos in there. He would just throw me in videos. He lives in LA now, so our friendship kind of separated, but we were very, very close. He lived at my beach house for like 90 days. My dad wanted to kick him out. And then Joe, his father, who I love, Joe Tornabedi, he like walks in. He's in like a white shirt and blue jeans, and he's like, can I cut the line? So everyone's in all black. He comes up, pays his respect, and I'll never forget what he said. He's like, I have a puppy in the car. I just have to get in here and say my respects real quick. I gotta go. And I was like, Joe, you're fine. So he leaves, and my mom's like, what the fuck? He cuts the whole line. It was so funny. It was so great. So I've always kind of had that kind of free-flowing personality in some things because my father was like that. Never heard my father complain. Even when he was diagnosed with cancer, he still went to work. He learned from his father. I mean, my dad was just, he was always in a good mood to like 99.9% of the time, no matter what was going on. And there was a lot of shit going on behind the scenes when my dad died that we found out. So, and then that built, and I had a seizure. And then when I came to, they did all the tests, functional MRIs. It was great, right? They put all the electrodes on my head. And, they're trying to stimulate a seizure to see my neuronal activity. So they got me in the dark room. They got all these electrodes on my head, and they're flashing all these lights. You guys will laugh so hard. I mean, you know me. I raised my hand, and I was like, I go to music festivals. This isn't going to do shit. Like, I'm at lasers all the time. Like, and they're like, oh, I guess that does make sense. So they found nothing. At the time, they diagnosed me with temporal lobe epilepsy because my memory would just go blank. When I got the really bad deja vu auras, I forgot who I was, where I was, what cancer my dad had. I got one really bad in the Cairo bookstore. My wife was very scared. All my teachers are like brain tumor, all the typical stuff they had to rule out. But they believe it was stress-induced, which obviously was making sense because my stress was building, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, they were just getting out of control to a large degree. And then, in June 2019, fast forward, I was going to take a pee at 3 a.m. My ears started ringing, and they were loud. It was like, I'm like, oh, okay. And then I went to sleep. I woke up. They were still ringing. Instantaneous panic attack. And boom, my OCD journey started around June 15, 2019. Severely chronically. And that was, I'm checking. I went to audiologists how many times? I went to the ER a few times. I watched every single podcast from the American Tinnitus Association, compulsively, obviously. Checking sounds. I stopped using my headphones. I stopped using knives on plates and all that stuff. And then November 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, I was in the mental hospital. And then November 15th, I was at EDC Orlando. I was at EDC Orlando, which I think that was my 8th time going to EDC Orlando. Because when I lived in Orlando, it was right there. Best music festival for me. Don't have to pay for flying. Don't have to pay for a hotel. Stay at my house. It's only 15 minutes away. And tickets were a lot cheaper back then. So it was like that and my drinking money. And party substances back in the day, which again, that was just not good. And yeah, I'm in the mental hospital. I remember was driving home from an event, just to let all of you know how bad I was. I was driving home from an event, and I tried to jump out of a moving car on the highway. I tried to commit suicide. I didn't want to live anymore. And I was playing video games. Remember at the time, my video games were really, really, really bad. And I heard a knock on the door, but there's one of these ones, like doom, doom, doom. And I'm like, fuck, she called the police. Like, I knew she was going to. I put her through so much between June, July, August, September. September is when it went from tinnitus to saliva and swallowing and blinking. And then October, November, so 6 months in, I was in the hospital. I used other different people in the community. I used other big coaches online, again, well-intentioned individuals, but didn't understand OCD, in my opinion, not the level that Rob did and that we preach here from the sufferer's perspective, again, just how we see it. And I had different therapists in person who are very well-intentioned, but not versed in OCD at all. And I felt hopeless. So I thought I would rather kill myself than go on with this. And then I went to the mental hospital. The first 30 hours, I was in a holding cell, which was called a Baker Act, an involuntary Baker Act. Even though I volunteered, because I didn't drive myself there and the police cuffed me, it actually was considered involuntary. You can imagine how lovely I took that. I was freaking the fuck out. I was so arrogant. And then remember the psychiatrist came in after I was moved from the 30-hour, by the way, 30-hour intake, plastic mattress, camera, window this big, no toilet, no bathroom, anything unless I had to go in the holding room with other people that were waiting to be going into the wing. And they were like, oh yeah, people would come in and be like, how are you doing? And I'm like, why the fuck am I here? They wouldn't let me have anything. And how long, I got Erica to bring me radiology books because I had a radiology test for school, like right after, I was like, I gotta get out of here. I have exams I have to take. So when they put me into the wing, I had to stay in that wing for 72 hours. So of course I'm like, wait, my original 30 hours didn't count? And they're like, no. And I'm like, and then I was walking down the wing and I remember one of the psychiatrists, I was like, hey, look, because I was like, I'm not taking any of these mood stabilizers. His exact words were, not to throw anyone under the bus here. I know they have very hard jobs. You know, just take your medication so you can go home. And I think I said something like, I don't think you have any idea I'm not taking those medications. So, I mean, that's how I spoke all the time. I don't fucking think you know. Like, I just, and not that you need to be like, oh, okay, I'll take the medications, but now I can weigh the pros and cons and just say, hey, no, I'm not going to take the meds. And then the psychiatrist came in with an intern. I've told this story before, and he's like, you are manic bipolar. And I think I said something very lovely, like, how do I know more about this than you do and you're a doctor? That's what I was just very abrasive. I was always ready to throw blows. Always. No matter if I didn't know how to fight and they did. I just was on guard all the time. Which is, again, why anger and frustration was a big part of my life, which I've gotten so under control by changing my life, by reading this book in here. Where is it? The first one on the Ellis one. How to Control Your Anger Before It Controls You. That's a really good one. How to Keep People from Pushing Your Buttons. Anger, How to Live With It and Without It. Just different Ellis books about anger because I really struggled with that. And he's like, I'm calling everyone. He's like, of course they have to beware. I said, I got to call your mom, your fiance, or because we weren't married yet, all sorts of stuff and see. And we weren't even engaged at that time, your girlfriend. And they're like, no, he just has ADHD, he has OCD. And they still didn't believe me because I was like, I can't stop noticing my saliva. And they're like, yeah, I don't think that's part of OCD. And I'm telling you, I was so mean. I really was so mean. I'm like, you are dumb. I kept saying that. I mean, he handled it so well, just how I handle the tough calls now. And it was funny because he was in a sling, he tore his, and then we like totally changed the subject. I was like, do you know how to rehab that properly? I was like, I can teach you. And he's like, what the fuck? So I probably did look manic beyond belief, which I was. I mean, I really was in a manic state of just anxiety driven and everything. So I left him in the hospital and then we graduated and I moved to Florida. I moved to Colorado. And then between when I moved to Colorado and May 1st, which is when I put my video games away. So coming up on the 4-year, that was one of my biggest compulsions. The police were called to my house 3 times in the middle of the night. And then a couple of times like after. I think they came like 4 or 5 times in general. I would just leave. I would just run out of the house. So I'd leave the house. It was actually, funny story. Last night I was in, music is the most important thing in my life. One of the most important things, without a doubt. I am very fortunate. I have a very neuronal, you could say, like neurology connection with music that a lot of people will never be blessed enough to have. I know many people that are like, I get nothing from music. And I don't think that's as much belief as it is circuitry in your brain, in the areas of your brain that experience music. Can you change that and force yourself to like music? To a degree, yes, but not on the level that I get literally visceral reactions to music. Goosebumps, makes me cry, all that stuff. I mean, it's wild. So I went for a drive last night. It was 9:30 at night. I said to Erica, I got to go for a 20-minute drive. I just want to listen to this song and just blast it. And I could see it in her eyes. She's like, she said, if you're not back in 20 minutes, call the police. I was like, this isn't 2020. But that response, right? That if you use the word trauma, that trauma response that she went through. I don't use that word a lot, but that is an understandable, term to use in that. And, and my habits, you got to remember how bad my habits were. Smoke 2 Juul pods a day minimum. And then I would throw the rig out because I would go, no, this is bad for me, throw it out, buy another one. So I would spend like $500 a month on Juul pods and Juuls, which I didn't have any money for that. Was living off credit card debt. It was so bad. Was 50 pounds overweight than I am right now. Play video games all the time. Didn't go to work. Ignore my wife. Stopped exercising. Severe adult website addiction. Just a lot of problems in that sexual hyperarousal department. Many people have that. You know how many people bring this up on calls? Some of you are watching this right now and going, me. A lot of people. This is not about a pro or anti-porn thing. I don't care about that. You got to make that decision yourself. It's like video games. Just because I don't play video games, some people can balance it. Can some people balance pornography? Sure. Do I think it's the best choice? No. Do I think there's more cons? Yes. Do I think there's some pros? Can be. Do I think that most people are using it incorrectly? Yes. And I just weigh that in the pros, cons. But you see a lot of people, when they go through a hard experience, they go, this is why it's bad. So you see someone who struggled with alcoholism go, this is why you should never drink. This is poison. This will kill you. That's a very, very bad way to approach anything. There are certain things. It's not a one-to-one ratio. I've yet to meet someone who can balance heroin or meth or crack. There are things out there, but humans want these cookie-cutter boxed approach. They want everything to be the same. I always use the example of a court of law. Well, that didn't happen in the OJ trial. That didn't happen in the Kavanaugh, the lawyer that murdered his wife. I said, it's called due process, and they're separate things. You can't compare the two. Humans are addicted to simplicity in the wrong way in many times. So life is complicated, much more complicated than we make it out to be. There is simplicity baked into the cake, but there's a lot of complexity for many different reasons. So can people balance pornography? I've seen it. Can people balance meth? Probably not. But people want to categorize like everything is a yes or no, yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. Sugar, no. Sugar, yes. Texting and driving, no, blah, blah, blah. It's like you're going to more than likely pick your phone up at times to answer the call and stuff like that, and stuff happens. And pick your phone up with the light. Not that I agree with that or it's legal. I'm just saying this is what humans do, okay? And then working to go away from these behaviors. So I had all of those behaviors which were really, really, really bad. Now, met Rob right after the mental hospital. So 2019 to May 2021, that's when I started to, my beliefs were more profound. But I was still very stuck. So what, 18 months to 2 years? Profound. 2021 and 22 were interesting years. I got a lot of relief in those years, but I was still stuck doing subtle compulsions. Body dysmorphia took me the longest. I did not want to let go of the idea that you could not be in shape and accept yourself. I held on to that like I was holding on to a railing hanging 1,000 feet off a building. I was like, I'm not letting go of that belief. I will not do it. Being in shape and looking good because of all my problems I was based around with women and needing to be accepted and wanting to be the man, all of that, I'm like, no, I'm never going to accept that belief. Well, there's a great quote. It's either by Henry Ford or Mark Twain. I forget which one, but it says, whether you think you can or you cannot, you're probably right. And that quote's just an amazing quote because if you think you can't get better, you're not going to be able to get better. There has to be some idea of blind faith in anything you do with risk-taking. So, and then, I had compulsively read the books, but I did a lot of the things right in some ways, but I talked a big game, as Rob talked about. He did a big, long voice notes in the group talking about everything where it came down to, what Nick was like, what Moment was like with Sam and Phil. And for me, I talked a very good game. I was the ultimate bullshitter. And I could talk a big game, but by myself, I suffered a lot in silence. I don't know if I got that because of the way I was raised, more than likely a piece of it to a degree. And then that belief was subconscious and followed me all the way throughout my life. But I just was comfortable suffering in silence until the very, very breaking point, which is total 0 to 100, black and white. But I didn't know any better at the time. I didn't know how to communicate. I always say we teach the wrong things in school. There's so many things in school that provide little to no value practically for life. And the fact that we have the same type of curriculum after 150 years is completely it's wild. Where people would be better off. The entire 11th grade could be split into like half academics and then half of like how to balance your money, right? How to not overspend, how a credit card works, how thinking about your belief system works, why habits work, why critical thinking and debating is good instead of putting people down and calling them idiots. But the problem is we don't teach that stuff, and then people go into the real world and they're faced with all the real problems, and it's like just being like boom, 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 just like hitting your head against the wall. And that's why I was reading a study recently that said that 75% of college graduates said that they're ready for the real world, and then 75% of it was in the critical thinking book, 75% of employers say they're not even close to ready for the real world because we just don't teach the right things, in my opinion. We do it in many ways, but not the things that could really be beneficial, like this stuff. And, day by day, I had, remember what I like to call the meat and potatoes of OCD and anxiety recovery. A lot of leaving things there, letting it play out. Whilst I slowly changed my beliefs, lots of confusion, lots of ups and downs, not taking subtle compulsions seriously. I didn't take any of the subtle compulsions seriously by any means at all. And then what happened was, I tell people, you could be working on your belief systems. Imagine you have a dartboard, right? But the dart doesn't have the metal piece. This is the belief, and the board is your development, embodiment of a belief. So you have that, this is the dart. And it's like, yeah, I can accept myself if I'm fat. False. There's no dart, remember? False. What the heck, Nick? I can't change my beliefs. And I say, well, let's look at your behaviors. What do you mean? Let me be frank. Sitting down and reading this book and doing some notes is comfy. That's comfy work. Yes, it's difficult, but it's comfy work. And yes, I know the myth of self-esteem is a difficult read. We understand that. We're very aware. You got to be careful. Remember what I said. The detractor type statements. That statement is understandable, holds no validity in your life. Of course it's hard. It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, then everyone wouldn't believe in self-esteem, the biggest myth ever, right? That doesn't mean you don't want to be recognized. It doesn't mean that, but you hold it in an unconditional manner. Of course, respect and notoriety has lots of benefits in many different ways, but it's not the only thing that matters, because that's what most people think. Reputation, reputation, reputation. You know, you hear people say, your reputation is the most important thing on earth. No, it's not. The most important thing on earth is oxygen, water, and safety. Like housing to some degree. But even that can be debated because of homelessness. Water and oxygen for sure. That's what really matters, right? Next would be money to some degree to get things like that. After that would probably be some human connection. Isolation isn't always the best thing, but you can accept that. And then other things, and then reputations like 75 down the list or something. But we really do believe that as a society. Again, that doesn't mean there aren't benefits from reputation, but we just say things. And then when you're getting better, and all these beliefs are changed now, by the way. My beliefs are completely changed. My behaviors are completely changed. I'm much more open-minded now. And working with all of you have really, really, really helped me in many ways with that. But this didn't come easy, and it took me a lot of time to get to where I am today. So there's a lot of hope. You can get better. Summarize, right? Because I got another minute or so before I turn it off. Or won't let me send it with this large of a file. Books on the reading list. Take your behavior seriously. You're not going to get it right off the bat. Lots of ups and downs. It's going to be a good journey. Poke fun at yourself. Make fun of your friends. Watch comedy. Comedy, taking the piss out of each other. I'm turning into a Brit. Sam's going to make fun. Take the piss out of each other, you know, because we just say bust each other's balls. You know, that's how we say it in Jersey. So, but it is important to realize that the people that take life very, very seriously, understandably so, create a lot of problems for themselves. And we always use different examples, but you guys all know the people I'm talking about who take life very seriously. You know, you don't have to be like David Goggins, okay? Nothing wrong with that, but you don't have to be that mean to yourself. So there's a better way to live, in my opinion. Thank you for everything. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy. This was a lot of fun. I really, 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 really do enjoy and love doing this every day of my life to some degree, 7 days a week. I love it. I love it. I love it. It means so much to me. Thank you for always following our stuff. Please reach out. Phil@ocdrecovery.com. Patience is on your side. Try not to reach out when you're mega triggered. Sit with the confusion. And hopefully we see you soon in the one-to-one in the webinar. Have a good one, everyone.